I jointed all the rough 2x, then ripped everything to width. The cloudlift top rail had to be cut by hand. I used a track saw for all the straight cuts, which worked especially well on the plunge cuts. I finished the radius cuts with a Carvex, cutting about a 1/16 of an inch away from the line. That bright light really helps me see the line. Then on to my old shopsmith and a drum sander to fair the large radius curves. And I used a Festool LS130 for final sanding on all the curves. Todd Burdock's SketchUp drawing included full-size templates for the sculpted cloudlift panels. I glued those templates to 1/4-inch hardboard, then cut just wide of the lines, first with a table saw, and then with a cordless Carvex. Viewed on video, that light on the jigsaw might seem to obliterate the line, but it doesn't when you're actually guiding the jigsaw. I was able to follow the lines perfectly, almost exactly a 1/16 of an inch from the line. Then it was back to my drum sander for the wide curves. And again, the LS130 was perfect for sanding the tight radius inside curves. I used the Rotex for fine-tuning the straight runs and outside radiuses. The 3/4-inch stock went through my planer first. Then I temporarily fastened the 1/4-inch templates to the cedar planks with drops of 2P10 glue. I used a 2-inch pattern bit and a CMS stand to cut out the cloudlift planks, which is much easier and a lot cleaner than a handheld router. There's hardly any sawdust. Some of the templates were used twice, so I removed them slowly and carefully. One more pass through the planer removed the small bits of hardboard at each spot of glue. We used the Domino XL for all the 2x joinery and the Domino 400 for all the 3/4-inch panels. Both machines have the same index lines, which I rely on a lot. Some of the mortises were registered off the edge of the rails, so I used the outside delta index marks. For the center registration marks, I index the mortises off the center delta lines. When using the Domino XL, always push the machine slowly to give the dust collector time to extract all the waste from the mortises. That way the cutters last longer and the mortises are cut straight and clean. We drilled out the 1 1/4 inch holes for the copper pipe on the drill press using a jig and a support.
This could be a big mistake if you start with the wrong section. You could end up gluing yourself into a corner real quick. So we glued up the center section first. It's only got 2 of the mid-stiles in it and a mid-rail, plus all of the sculpted panels. And once that dried, we glued up these 2 end sections with the pipes. And this is just an intermediate style and an intermediate rail up here. So this is a really simple glue up. There's only this joint here and this joint here. But all of those sections had to be glued up before I could put the bottom rail on or the top rail, let alone the 2 end stiles. And the top rail is going to be last. I'm going to glue up the bottom rail next. The top rail has to be last so I can fit those small little pieces in that go between that intermediate style, between that intermediate rail and the top rail. And once the top rail is on, I'll do the 3rd glue up, and that'll be the 2 end stiles. These are the holes we bored for the pipe. And we pre-finished this area and finished the insides of these holes with Sikkens too, so they wouldn't rot out if water got stuck in there. And we didn't pre-finish this section where the style is going to get mortised, where the style is going to get glued up. So we're going to put a bunch of glue inside these mortises, inside these domino mortises, and paint the insides of those so they're totally sealed, so no moisture can get in there. Then I'm going to paint this exposed wood too with plenty of glue so it's completely sealed right up to the line. And here's the line right here on the outside of this bottom rail, the line where the intermediate style is going to intersect this bottom rail. There we go.
Once you start spreading glue with this many dominoes and glue joints, you gotta really move fast. With a little finessing, all the dominoes lined up with the mortises. I trimmed the short radius top rails last and then laid out those mortises. And the final step was gluing up the 2 end stiles. Bessie's bar clamp extenders came in handy on this unusually large project. Then it was time to sand. I used the RO90 with a delta pad to get into all the tight corners and remove excess glue, especially on the panels. I used the Festool 150 with 100 grit and 120 grit paper, and that took off all the rough spots. And last, we eased all the edges with an 1/8 inch roundover bit. You know, usually I shoot pictures of every single thing I do step by step. But this time, I didn't have the patience. I wanted to get this gate up as quick as I could, and I wouldn't stop to take any pictures. But let me tell you what we did to hang this thing, because it made the whole job easy. I started by making a story pole. I'm going to walk around to the other side of the gate in a minute and show you what I mean by this story pole. It really solved a lot of problems. And what we did did was, before we could use the story pole, we temped the gate in here. We set it up on blocks, and we kind of sort of leveled it. I mean, the terrain up here is so funny and so screwy, we couldn't make it perfectly level. And the posts are out of plumb in this direction, and they're out of plumb in this direction too, about 5 inches. So this was really a matter of splitting the difference and coming up with the best of all worlds, kind of. So we temped up the gate across here, got it level as possible, and then we used the story pole to lay out the bolt holes in the post. And I'll show you what I mean. Let's walk around the other side. So I started by making a story pole. I took a stick of wood and I marked the center for every single hinge laid off from the very bottom of the gate. That way, once we shimmed the gate up and had it blocked up to the right elevation, I was able to take the story pole and set it right on the same block. Now before I did that, I finished the story pole. I turned it around and I marked the location. Once I had the center of the hinge, I marked the location of where these J-bolts came right through the pole. So I knew exactly where to drill each one of these bolts right through the pole. But that's not the only thing we did. We kind of changed these J-bolts a little bit. Come on in here real close and I'll show you what I mean. We heated up this all thread with a torch and bent it at 90 degrees to create the pins, the pivot pins for every one of these hinges. I didn't want to use the lag bolts that came with the hinges because I had to plumb these up. This is my only way of getting the gate relatively plumb. This pin right here is pretty close to the pole. It's only about 1.5 inches away, whereas the bottom pin down here, this pin's about 3 inches away from the pole. That was the only way we could plumb this gate up so that it wouldn't open up too fast when you pulled the latch loose. And when we bent this all thread, you'll notice we bent the J-hook pretty tall, a lot higher than the pins that came with these hinges. That's because I wanted to be able to put a pair of jam nuts underneath each one of these hinges. That way we could adjust the jam nuts and take the weight off the gate evenly at every single one of the hinges. We made the latch in my shop too. It's another piece of western red cedar, and I turn this knob. It runs right through the gate on a slot. So this slides back and forth real easily. We welded up these plates in the shop, and we welded up the striker too. The whole gate works extremely nicely.